thank you for joining us in the third episode of the Quality Horizon series. Today, we're diving into one of the most pressing challenges here in software testing, and that is on how to effectively scale and streamline QA processes. Imagine transforming an 8-person manual testing process that takes hundreds of hours into an automated situation or system that automates hundreds of scripts in only minutes. And that is exactly what our guest speaker achieved, and she is going to tell us all about it today. Today, the gap between functional and performance testing is costing organizations countless of hours and resources. We just finished analyzing the survey data for the State of Software Quality Report, which Catalon will release in just a few weeks for 2025, where thousands of participants from around the world in the testing industry participated. And we discovered that nearly 25% of you, the testing professional, have automated only 10% of their test suites, while in contrast, only 10% have automated more than 75% of their testing suites. What does this mean is that there is a huge gap and a huge sign that many organizations are still laying the groundwork for full-scale automation. I am excited to introduce today Daniel Fourier, a software QA analyst who has spent over a decade strategizing, designing, and executing tests to ensure systems are ready for customer use. Her journey and in implementation while managing complex enterprise applications mirrors the challenges that many of you are facing today. In the survey, we also discovered that over 55% of testing teams report not having enough time for thorough testing. And this is a challenge that Danielle has tackled head on. Also, as we look ahead, the survey has revealed that more than 60% of professionals are planning to adopt AI testing tools in the near future, and where many of you are citing ease of use as one of the driving factors, as well as integration and cost. Danielle's framework and strategies addresses all these concerns, and today she will share her practical experiences and strategies for building a scalable and a QA practice that lasts. So without further ado, please join me and welcome Danielle Fourier. Danielle, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, both Catalan and Octoper, for asking me to host this session, and we look forward to diving into how functional and performance testing can be integrated within your applications, within your teams, and so that you get the best experience and the best return on your investment.
Excellent. We're looking forward to that. So now you may have noticed that we also have here Wamar Nadil, a load testing expert from Octoperf. He's going to help us with the conversation and answer any technical questions that you may have about performance testing. And I am your humble host today, Lucio Daza from Catalan. Before we begin, this is what you're going to expect in the conversation today. We're going to talk about the journey. We're going to talk about how to choose the right QA tool, how to strategize, and all the best practices that Danielle has learned over her journey. One last thing before I pass the mic. This is being recorded and it will be available on demand on catalan.com/webinars later. Should you need to leave earlier, hopefully that's not the case, or if you need to catch up on anything that you may want more clarification on. Also, we will have a Q&A session at the end. This time is for you. However, don't wait until then to ask any questions that you may have. Go ahead and put it down below in the QA button in the Zoom interface, and we will go ahead and address all those questions for you. Without further ado, Danielle, the time is yours.
Thank you, Lucio. Good morning, everyone. So let's start to talk on how to build a QA team. In my experience and over a decade of working as a QA analyst, expert in both the industry and government side of organizations, I've learned a lot of things, and they're not always easy lessons to learn, but they are very instrumental on how to move forward. I joined a national lab back in 2020 after spending the majority of my career in private industry. So it changed a little bit on how you look at practices, how you look at collaborating, tool selection and everything is different in the government sector. But over the past few years, I've been able to work with amazing team members across applications like SAP S/4HANA, Microsoft going from Office suites to 365, ServiceNow, SuccessFactors, you name it. I've pretty much touched a lot of those major applications and being able to build on the foundation of a testing landscape so that way team members can use best practices. They have a foundation of guidelines to work with. So within the past few years in the government sector, I have focused on kind of formalizing QA practices that may not have always been solidified. Working with, teams that are outsourced, full time. It was kind of collaborative effort to be able to bridge the gap. Diving into Agile. Agile's taking a big space within the testing world and the project management space in the past few years. So that definitely affects how people approach testing within their projects. I created a software guidelines and best practices document. I currently host a QA COP session across a few of the national labs that not only use Octoperf and Catalan, but just want to join and kind of cross collaborate and see how we can help each other. And then I present at a IT conference every year. It's coming up this May in Denver, and I'm looking forward to talking about ERP testing at that conference and summit. But I just wanted to share a little bit about how we create a team and how we work together. You could go to the next slide.
There you go.
Thank you. So before we even talk about new tools, we have to talk about how our teams work together, how we dive into a project and dissect it to be able to create workflows, build test cases, confirming access to make sure everyone is where they're supposed to be. And then, of course, going through some cyber checks, because in this day and age, we want to make sure that we're not opening up our developers' code, our testing, suites to any vulnerabilities that could later be put into production without even knowing it. So the first thing of finding the workflows, we go through our projects and basically dissect them and figure out who do we need functionally, who is the best person to test a project. And then we take all of those requirements and break them down into workflows. User journeys, mapping, we do a lot of that. Personas, we try to take on the perspective of the customer. So it's not just the functional side of the testing, but we take on that UAT kind of perspective to make sure that we really are creating a holistic approach to what we are going to automate. So we take apart those workflows, we break them into smaller chunks, kind of as if you were approaching a regression suite. You want to do a login, you want to create an object, you want to select that object, and you want to finalize that object, whatever that means in your application. So we take those down and break them apart to figure out how do we approach those? How do we create building blocks within applications like Catalan? It works very well with creating smaller test cases and building that suite that creates that reusable artifacts to be able to bridge the gap and kind of create a full end-to-end workflow process. So within the test cases, we kind of build them so that you could do data-driven, and I'll talk about that a little later on. Create repeatable, reusable artifacts that can be used. And then confirming the access. We want to make sure that everyone that's using the tools, using the test, is able to get into the systems, have the right permissions. We don't want to, violate any, laws of giving someone more access than they should. And that they can execute these tests without interruption, because the last thing we want to do is start a test and 4 screens and you get an authentication box that you can't get through. And then, of course, we verify everything with our cybersecurity teams. I've been doing that for over 15 years. No matter where we are, no matter what kind of industry you're at, it's always best to get whether it's cyber or information security, your networking teams, get them to look at what you're creating and what you're exposing, because we don't want to let that get out to the customer and get out into production. Next slide. So how do we get the right tools? Within the past few years, it's been a very extensive process of trying to evaluate testing tools. So how do we do that? Or what do we do? Where do we start? I've created a matrix to be able to look at what tools have, but first it's what does your team need? Is your team well versed in writing code? Are they developers by nature? Are they just more functional QAs that cannot write code and need that point click record in order to create your automation scripts? Getting the needs of your team is always, I think, top priority to make sure that the tool that you purchase is going to work the best for them. And that includes doing evaluations of the tools. But then looking at your projects and seeing what's your tech stack look like? What do we need to make sure that the scripts that we're creating are going to work within the tools that we're buying? That way we're not buying 50 tools and only 2 of them work. So it's getting the requirements from all the testers, identifying the people, what their needs are. Are they point and click, or are they going to sit there and write code in a different language? And then assessing your skill levels as well, because we want to make sure that we find something that's very flexible to work with everyone that we have in our infrastructure. And then, is it cloud? Is it on premise? There's always a conversation between everyone wants to do everything in the cloud, but then there are some positives to having things on premise. We want to encrypt passwords. We want to make sure things that are behind firewalls stay behind them. There's applications that need a private website URL that cannot be accessed by a cloud. So these tools, both Catalan, Octoperf, we found them very, very flexible in doing just that. And I know Lamar can elaborate a little bit on the how Octoperf has both on-premise and cloud.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. I mean, it's very important to have both solutions because a lot of the time you will have some companies who can directly use a SaaS platform, a cloud platform, because they don't have sensitive data to upload, so they can just use the cloud solution. But you might have some companies who, on the contrary, will just need their data to be closed without any access to the internet because of course, security concerns. And you have to have that solution to offer to them. And having both means that you can provide any kind of service for any kind of company. And maybe sometimes you can even provide the 2 solutions for one customer, so they can just switch back and forth depending on what they want. So yes, I mean, it's very important to have the possibility to use both and to provide both.
So I want to poke a little bit on the topics that we're seeing here, because then, as I mentioned at the beginning, we analyzed the data of thousands of people participating in the State of Software Quality Report survey, and one of the things that surprisingly came up in when picking up a new tool for an automation strategy, in the following order, I quote, ease of use was selected by 72% of the participants, followed by cost, which was indexed by 62%, and last but not least, seamless integration with other tools and infrastructure was selected by almost 60% of all of them. What do you think of those numbers? Right, there is almost a bright balance across the board. So ease of use, cost, and integration.
Yeah, it's definitely something that the matrix that I have basically does that. You're checking off all your applications, you're checking off, cost for whether it's a I forgot the word, perpetual license, whether it's by user license, some are by project. And that cost definitely adds up, especially if we have larger testing teams. If we have testing teams into, 30, 50, 100 users, that per user license can get very costly versus a software that you just install the tool and whoever needs it uses it, right? Cost is definitely, but I do agree with the ease of use being the number one, just because you want to make sure that you're able to use the tool that you're buying and that it's going to work. So,
yeah, as you said, you might have different kind of profiles or backgrounds using the tool. So you need to make sure that everyone is going to be able to use it, or it's just going to be like forgotten in one side of your company and not used by the majority of the testers.
Yeah. Another statistic that that I have in front of me here is that the lack of automation skills also is one of the challenges that many organizations are facing, and is the fact that there are many tools out there, but it requires an extremely high level of programming skills. And then how I imagine those that factors also into what you were saying, Danielle. You want reusable objects. You want to make sure that there is collaboration. You want to make use that there is ease of use. All these must factor in the fact that is it hard to find people out there who are extremely well programmers who like to do coding rather than doing testing in a more intuitive way. I bet, right?
Yeah, I've definitely seen where, it's if you look up my daughter's looking at colleges, and you can't look at a college and say, I want to be a QA tester or I want to be a QA analyst. What degree can I go for that? There's not direct ones. It's you go down developer paths, you go down a cybersecurity path, you go to computer science in general. But having a testing, like I call it the testing brain versus the developer brain, you have to merge those two together. You need the logical thinking of a QA person that's, figured out how to dissect requirements into a test case, how to take those test cases and break them down into chunks that can be used for automation. Figuring out, just normal testing suites, whether it's manual and you need to do user acceptance or regression. It's all of those things that you learn in, I feel like, more real life practice than you can get from a textbook. And when you're looking at automation, like I need to hire an automation person for a project, they not only need to be well versed enough in that application, whether it's SAP, ServiceNow, HP, anything. You also need to have that developer background or testing knowledge to say, okay, I'm going to go into this application and I'm going to use this tool that may be Selenium based like Catalan. How do I bridge the gap? How do I put those two together? And it's, it's far and few between where you find a good group of people that are well versed in as many of the applications. That's, just how they call it, full stack developer. I feel like they need to have a full stack tester as well.
Absolutely. All right, I just wanted to pepper in those statistics because again, is the real world talking to us, and I wanted to emphasize with the audience that your strategy is like spot on. So it's not just what work, but also what the industry is telling us. I'm sorry. Back to you, Danielle.
Oh no, you're fine. You could go to the next slide. So I was talking about tech stack. These are just a few of the ones that I've used in the past decade, and there's hundreds more, whether it be industry, whether it's government, there's so many applications out there, and there's so many different tools that we need to make sure integrate. That I feel like Catalan and Octoperf have proved very well for the past few years. I've used other testing tools. It's not like I've only used two. And some are harder to get the integrations to work, or there's configuration charges that come into play because they see a name like ServiceNow or SuccessFactors, and there's charges for that. So it all kind of comes into play in selecting the tools. Are if you have bigger name, the big name tools out there, do you want to have to pay a fee every time you try to use a tool just because they're tied to those big name applications? Most of the times you don't, but if it's the only thing out there, then, that is an application that you may end up choosing. But, both of your tools have been very adaptive in working with all of these. Catalan's, API testing works very well for some of our applications versus the record and click works really great for all our front end web-based tools. And then we have the visual testing. I've seen a lot of UI UX teams throughout organizations that need that visual component, and they need to be able to do capability and ADA test on their applications, their websites, their screens and everything else, and that gives them that extra visual component to it that we've really kind of fallen in love with. So next slide. Unless you guys wanted to add anything or no. No. Okay.
Oh, Wamara, anything from you?
No, I mean, you said it all, but yeah, it's really important to have a tool that can integrate with other tools. Just like before, if you don't have that kind of options, it will not get adopted by other people in your own organization, and they won't use it. So it's mandatory to have that nowadays, yes.
All right. Thank you.
So here is just a few more of the from that matrix that we kind of look at, or I look at when kicking a new tool, is the research. A lot of organizations, some in the governance sector, use Gartner. Gartner's the well-regarded reporting, like you said, of the surveys and everything else. So the Gartner reports definitely come into play. For people in the government sector, there is something called FedRAMP. It's an extensive process that vendors go through to get put onto the FedRAMP marketplace, to be able to be used for government contracts and be able to know that their data is secure and everything else, all the rigorous pieces that organization checks before putting any of their tools on there. The integration. Can you work with your CI/CD pipelines? Will these tools work with Jenkins or Git? Evaluating. I've done a lot. I think every tool we've done, I've used in the past 10 years, I've asked for an evaluation copy. There's organizations that completely frown upon it and they don't have them, or you have to pay just to get an evaluation copy. Catalan, I think we had a 60-day evaluation because we were really trying to make sure that applications that integrated workflows and everything else could really use all of Catalan's pieces, all of the foundations and components, like the modules that you're able to use will work with all of your different major applications. So there's no harm in asking a company, hey, can you have an evaluation copy? Can I demo it? Can we do more than just, the sales pitch? Really dig into those things. And both Catalan and Octoperf were extremely, helpful in giving those demos, doing evaluations. We had multiple, into the tens of conversations before picking tools because you want to make sure it's the right thing.
One of the things that I'll chime in here, and I'll repeat again from the survey, 60% of people are mentioning integration is with CI/CD pipelines is almost vital. Like almost all of you testing professionals are telling us it has to integrate. And it comes, I think this signals the fact that, there is not only one tool that fits all. Like these pipelines need to work, and not in a brittle way, but it pretty much has to be seamless, right? And then, and Wamara, I'll put you on the spot. You in this case playing a key part of this whole integration with the framework that Daniel is showing us. You must see not only that with Daniel's team, but also other industries, correct?
Yes, over the years, it changed a lot. Like I started 13 years ago, and of course, nobody was talking about DevOps at the time. And now it's like every customer that we contact, they ask DevOps. So it's mandatory. Everyone is doing it. It's in every company now, basically. So you can't do without it. And a lot of the time, if you don't have it, you're out of the market. So yes, it's like mandatory. Yeah.
Is a no-brainer.
A project that needed loaded performance testing. So we already had Catalan. It was what tools work with Catalan to do that loaded performance testing, and Octoperf was the first one that popped up, and we were like, okay, how does this work? How do we create scripts in Catalan and then toss them over the fence to Octoperf to be able to throw them against 1,000 users, across multiple areas? So that's things that we've done, and proof of concepts, and just even the evaluation period is saying, okay, how do they really integrate? How easy is it to really go from, even an automation tool to a load of performance testing tool? It doesn't have to be from DevOps up to automation. Just how do they all work together, and how easy is it to do that transition?
That is great. And one of the things I want to ask you, this is more out of curiosity. So you have a very cool framework here. You have the research, and so you go on the Gartners of the world, the G2s of the world, all these tech review places and reports. Then you have the marketplaces, the integrations. You do the evaluation, and then the concept at the end. At the end, you have, I think it's arguably one of the most interesting challenges, which is to champion these internally to your management, right? So, out of the entire equation that we're looking at here, how much weight would you give that last bar that we're seeing there to present to management?
It definitely puts the weight and the, picking a favorite behind it, because as it's not just myself doing evaluations. It's
Right.
I bring the entire group of people that I'm working with so that I'm not biased. I want that unbiased, hey, you're doing this kind of project, make sure it works with, this and this. Having that other person, when there's 7 or 8 testers on a team, you bring them all in, and because they're all working on different things, they're all in different tech stacks. So you want to make sure that you're really servicing the needs of your group and not just yourself. So doing the proof of concept, and there's a demo. We do a demo basically at the end of it and present all of the information in, table-like structures to say, here are all the things that they do. Here's what they don't do. Here's the cost structure. And of course, then leadership management would say, what are you thinking? What do you think is the best? And we put our weight behind it. But they could very well go with another tool that's more cost effective, because at the beginning, they don't see that return on investment for the ease of use, for the functionality and the integrations. And I've been in organizations where, hey, they just want the cheapest thing out there because they don't want to spend the money. And then 6 months, a year into the contract, they're like, oh, let's automate them. You say nothing. And they go, why? Well, because we couldn't get it to work with our firewalls, or we couldn't get it to, it needed to be private tool sector versus cloud functions. Well, they never crisscrossed. They never worked. So it definitely makes a difference in presenting the data, getting all the information, and kind of wrapping it up with a bow and saying, here's everything that we need. And being hopeful that your management trusts your opinion and your, perspective on what is best for the group. And there's times it goes wrong. There's, I've had tools where we've used for a year or two, realized we really weren't able to get what we thought out of it, and we make a switch. So
There is also the point of, like, as you present this to management, where we may be looking at other angles of the equation of, like, okay, how much ROI is this going to present? Is how much what is the actual benefit to the business? And one of the things that we discovered in the survey was that the mature organizations they report 60% faster time to market when they implement automation, like implement. And in addition to that, they see, when they see integrations like this one, they see more than 40% on reduction in cost. So that is also the value of, like, there is the ease of use that we were talking about earlier, collaboration, getting all the ball rolling within the team and the lab. But then again, the benefit that it brings to the table for the business. And one of the cool things that we discovered throughout the report is that now QA is evolving in the sense of, it's not only being seen as, like, okay, you are the team that are going to find defects and make sure that they don't make it to production, but now you are this strategic part of the organization that is going to allow the organization succeed as a business. As in before, I don't think culturally wise in the in tech industry it was being seen that way. So it's pretty cool to see the shift of, like, okay, now we see your value, right? Now you are not just somebody fixing things. You're part of the strategic movement of the company. So all right, back to you, Danielle.
the whole shifting left for testing that myself and a lot of my colleagues have been really trying to drive home for the past 5 or 6 years, especially, is getting organizations to understand QA's value, and it's at the beginning of the project. It's not at the end where you throw it over the fence to testing after you've been developing things for 2 years and now it's got to go to market in a month. And it's like, oh, let me throw it over to a QA tester. You really need that QA insight and that testing insight as you're developing it, before you're developing it, because we think of things in different ways and can kind of pinpoint, hey, what about this? What about that? What about this? I ask so many questions. People don't always like me in meetings, but I ask questions that later down the road, they may see, oh, okay, we addressed this because it was thought of way back at the beginning and now we don't have errors.
Right. So let me put you on the spot because we got a very interesting question in the chat right now. So for teams who are trying to, or who would like to adopt a strategy like the one that you're showing us today, what there's a question from, I am going to mess this name badly, Tanwi, I believe. He or she is asking, what are the KPIs that you have chosen to show the efficacy of QA in your, or to your management? When you were presenting this entire framework, did you find yourself like trying to figure out, okay, what are the numbers that I want to show them? Because one thing is to show like, okay, this is going to work, but then again, as a manager, they probably were like, okay, show me the KPIs. What would you recommend to teams listening to us today?
I would say to look at your organization, to look at your projects that you're trying to automate, and whatever automation tools you're using. I recently had a workflow that was designed. You would think it's pretty simple. Anybody in an inventory management type space would say this is, this thing may take me 10 minutes in this application to be able to create a goods receipt and process it through the inventory system and create a report. We were able to automate it using Catalan, and we got that workflow down to 29 seconds. Just a single one. Then we multiplied that and went through 500 different objects. We drove it into if you want to go to the data-driven slide, I don't know if that one's next or not. But creating data-driven tests where you can create an Excel spreadsheet, put in, 500 POs, 500 items, 500 costs and quantities, and be able to create those loops. And now instead of having 10 minutes per one of those singular workflows, now you're down to 20 something seconds. And then you can loop through, say, a couple hundred of them in that same 10 minutes. The cost reduction, the labor reduction, and the people doing it, I think the biggest scare of automation is they think their jobs are going to go away. They think if you automate their workflows that something is going to disappear from. That's not the case. We're trying to make your jobs easier. Automation is trying to make that. If you could go to the next slide, I think it's there's one. I do have a slide on there. Yep, that one. So the disconnection between the functional, the performance, and just the two wording flip-flops up there, test automation versus automated testing. There's a gap. People think they're the same thing and they're interchangeable. Test automation is the concept of doing this, of taking all of these, workflows, all of these project flows, these user acceptance tests, and breaking them down and putting them into automation. But creating automated tests is something completely different. And when we bridge the gap between the two, it's a monster of a workforce that can help people get through hours of work in minutes. Or something where if it works with your CI/CD pipelines, every time you do a release, every time there's support pack upgrades, you just hit a button and it flows through 500 or 600 tests. And now you've basically done an entire smoke test on your application in minutes versus hours of multiple people working. So there's so much benefit to creating automated scripts. And it's not just to, bring testing up a level, but being able to do that and then adding loaded performance testing to it, taking that regression suite or that test suite and throwing it into loaded performance. And now instead of it a singular run through, now you're doing it times 100 people or 1,000 people across 20 minutes. seeing where your network issues are as well, because that also exposes if your network's a little flaky. You want to make sure that the bandwidth is going to be accessible and usable no matter how many people you have on it. So it just kind of elevates automation to a different level.
Let me also put you in the spot here. We're getting a lot of cool questions in here, so I want to make sure that I pick your brain. But let me take a step back also, and one more, to support what Daniel was telling us a minute ago about the KPIs. What would you suggest teams also? And then the second, I will follow up with something that related to AI and what we're seeing here in this disconnect with automated testing. But yeah, first I wanted to ask you, what do you think? What KPIs do teams need to go ahead and take a look at?
Yes, for performance testing, it's a little bit different because what is going to be important in terms of KPI is asking how many times your application was down last year, for instance, and for how long. And so you take those numbers and then you verify what happens after implementing performance testing, and you can see the improvement thanks to performance testing. And another thing that is important will be the response time of your application. How much time it takes to connect to your application before and after performance testing and optimizing the application. And you might see that after 1 year, you save 30% of time for the login, 50% of time for buying a product on the platform. And that way you can reduce, for instance, if you have an e-commerce application, you can reduce the whole time it takes to buy your product. And so you have more chance of having the customer buy the product. Or even if it's not commercial, if it's an internal application, helping your company users to use your application more efficiently and more quickly will also be something that you can show to your management and say, okay, my application is out faster, so everyone is happier now.
There is a high percentage of participants in the survey who are directors and above who declared that, or who told us in the survey that definitely time to market is one of the KPIs that they're paying attention to. So then again, to the person in the chat, who, depending on who your persona is, you may be talking about test coverage percentage, you may be talking about test maintenance percentage, or reduction in time. You may also look at reduction on test creation, right? And then and Daniel, I wanted to follow up on what you mentioned a couple of minutes ago about people or professionals being somewhat nervous about automation taking away their job, and or not necessarily their job, but yeah, like taking away what they are capable of doing. We are seeing a very similar shift with the impact of AI in QA as well, and that's one of the questions that we ask people. We ask them, like, how concerned are you with AI taking away your job? And what was interesting, it was very surprising, is that I don't have the percentage in front of me, but it was a considerable amount of people said we are very concerned about AI taking our job. So at the same time, more than 60% of people said we are still seeing value in AI and we want to start using AI within the next 12 months because they have noticed that AI has increased efficiency in their automation testing processes. So similar to automation, I did have a conversation with multiple folks in one of the industry events that we participated a few months ago, and most of them were like, "Listen, when you're a veteran, when you have been working in testing for a while, you know your scripting, you know your programming and everything. The thought of having a tool taking all that away it made him like the way that these people were talking to me, or these visitors to the booth were talking to me, is they were like, we want to have control of what we're doing. But to your point, it is great to see that the value is being uncovered on like, okay, hang on a minute, we are not, automation is not going to take that away from you. You still have control of what you're going to test. We still have your input as a human, as an expert on what is going to have to be tested, what is going to be the best strategy for automation, etc. So it's a matter of like AI is doing it too. Is not going to take away your job, people. It's not. And then the same thing with automation. It's just going to make you a much better tester if you use it responsibly. Because that's another thing that we have discovered. Like automating everything is not the solution either, right? So you don't want to go ahead and put everything on an automation frenzy, and then you're dealing with extremely high maintenance rates and all the challenges that come with that.
Yeah, I saw something in the chat about the maintenance, and during my monthly QA sessions that we hold with anyone basically interested within QA and testing within across the national labs, is being able to create test cases, whether they're manual or automated, and portability, maintenance, and usability or reusability is some of the biggest things. Where if you're creating a workflow that's a shopping cart, your normal go to a website, pick a product, and you put that all into one script, but then that product gets discontinued. Well, now you broke your script. So now how do I go fix my script? Learning how to break those down and create a login, and then create a search, and putting those as separate components, and then stringing those together. So that way, when your separate component changes, that product gets discontinued and replaced with something else, you just have to go replace that first little area and go do it in one section. And then it flows down through all of the other scripts that you have that, component in. So the maintainability, if you build the scripts in the best way, is not bad. It's not hard, because now you're just, you're plucking out one thing, putting in another. It's not that you have to rewrite all of your workflows. If you don't break them down, you'll end up having to do that, and then the maintenance is something that nobody would want to handle.
Excellent, thank you. Did you want me to move to the next one here?
Yeah, you could go to the next one.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry, we lost train of thought for a second. Okay, so this kind of builds upon that a little bit more. I forgot it was the next slide. So, building solid tests, what does that look like? Whether it's manual or automated, load, performance. It's taking a workflow, breaking it down, making it portable. We all change environments. Some of us have, multiple environments, multiple devs, multiple QAs, multiple pre-production environments. If we're not also creating our tests to be able to interchange that URL to flip from one to the other, we're also, harming ourselves, because that's another key component of making your test easily maintained. How do we get to go flip from one environment to another? We want to make sure that, hey, if this environment has a second level of authentication, we have that script ready. So where for this environment, you need this round of, this script's work. Another environment, you may have to change some things, or maybe it gets a little easier. So being able to build in the portability so that it goes from one environment to another with ease is definitely important. The usability, we want everyone to be able to come into a project and take a test and know what to do with it, whether it's automation or manual. If a new automation person comes in, we want them to be able to look at our test suite and say, okay, I can work with, 90% of everything that's already built, because we built it with ease. We didn't bury things under, call stacks and everything else to where you have to go dig all that information out. We wanted someone to be able to come in, look at our scripts, and say, okay, I may have to change 2 or 3 or 5, but I don't have to rewrite their entire test suite, because now I'm a new person on a team. And then the maintainability that I mentioned before. So we also want to make sure some of the other principles, reliability. We want to make sure that it works on your environments. It's compatible with your integrations. It's got its performance responsiveness, whether you add on a loaded performance testing tool, or you have ways to do it within the tool that you're working at. We want to make sure that location over location, the performance is there. And then the functionality truly meets the customer need. Because if we're not meeting our customer's need, what are we doing it for?
That is where everything focuses. That's where the road ends, right? The customer.
Yeah. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about here are some of the strategies, and I've kind of touched on them a little bit more. But building test suite, especially within Catalan, that feeds into test ops. For anyone that's not familiar, that is the portal and platform that allows you to see your runtimes, your flaky code. I've run this test 200 times now, and it's broken, 195 of those times. Like, what's wrong? So being able to build those smaller component tests, pulling them together into a test suite to be able to get that visibility into how they're really working, how they're running, and then creating those data-driven loops. I'll come back to number 3 in a second. But also the no-code testing framework that everyone's diving into, whether it's the large language models, whether it's AI, being able to capitalize on the information that's out there and, strategies that kind of build upon what you're doing to boost that performance, that efficiency, to be able to take the guesswork that you are thinking out of the equation helps. And then I do want to go into the data-driven a little bit more on the next slide. So we try to do a lot of data-driven wherever we can. Like I said, inventory systems, payroll systems are another one. I previously worked on a project where we were redoing the time tracking or time collection. And we created scripts. There's different types of employees, whether subcontractors, you have your full-time employees, you may have people that are half and half or hourly salary. All organizations have a combination of their workforce. So creating a data-driven test to be able to float through safely with encrypted passwords, safely go through their different workforce, differentiations. Some use cost objects, WBSs, time collection codes, you call it whatever it is. However you're billing your time against a project or an application or area, and then creating a script that'll go through the days of the week. And every day of the week, it's a different number. And you flip-flop. One week it's this. The next round of your data-driven tests, or it totally changes all those numbers. And, you can build in those validations every step of the way. You can build in the validations that check the number of hours at the end, and build that into your automation script. So if you're always supposed to have 35 hours, but you by accident hit 36, it flags it. It says, go back and fix this one. You can create those negative tests as well. It's not just happy path. Everyone focuses on happy path. People forget about the negative testing. You want tests to fail. You want tests to show you that there's an error in the code and not just make sure everything works perfectly. So I think that's another very big component of not just manual testing, but automated testing is doing that negative test validation and building in all those checkpoints that are available to us to say that something is wrong. Let's go flag it and make sure that we catch that it's wrong.
In your perspective, Danielle, how many times, or what is the percentage of guesswork that you would have to do when manually testing something before going into automation? That, like you're mentioning right now, don't just do the happy path. That is the assumption that everybody is going to go down a happy path. How much guesswork is involved on okay, I think this is what the user is doing versus these are the actual paths that there is a percentage of people that are taking?
There's definitely always going to be guesswork just to see, especially if it's a new application or something went through a major change, because you're not sure how the response of the application is going to, effectively work with your normal path. But I think a lot of that is walking through the scenarios with your users before you automate it. It's not just taking a functionality playbook and saying, this is what it's supposed to do. It's spending time with your user group and saying, how do you use this application? Do you click it in order? For time tracking, do you put your time in twice a day? Do you do it once a week? Do you do it, how many times are you also accessing the system to be able to put your entries into it? Not just, okay, when I do it in 2 seconds and I'm in and out. Well, that in and out times 1,000 people when it's 2:00 in the morning or it's 2 in the afternoon could be a difference in performance for one, but it also shows flexibility of the system. So I think it's learning who you're building the test for, not just, oh, this is what it's supposed to do.
That is an extremely good point, because one of the things that we discovered with the survey was also that in terms of QA being a strategic partner now for the business, those organizations who are involving users, or like you said, end users in the QA process, are seeing more ROI, and they're seeing also less defects in production. I want to. There is a question that we have in the chat. Do we want to address that right now, Omar, or is it something that we can do in the Q&A?
Oh, I would just add quickly that for these subjects, that it's a lot of the time it's forgotten that you need also to have data-driven testing in performance testing. So Daniel talked about that a little bit, but depending on the data you use, you might have different performances. And I've seen a lot of people just, I don't know, like, let's say you want to do a 3,000 concurrent users load test. You will use only one login, the same, I don't know, like product code, the same, only one for all those users. And you might have some blind spots because of that in your results. And so I would say it's really important to also take the data into account when you prepare your load test. And about the question, I mean, you can go on with the question if you want.
Okay. Sounds good. Daniel, back to you.
All right. Next slide. Okay. So I think part of the conversation, as well as how, as a testing group and unit, is it working, right? How do you boost your efficiency as a team? And I polled a number of testers within organization, coworkers, and just colleagues. And I said, hey, you've been using automation for 5 years now or 3 years now. What's your best ROI? What have you done in your organization that has made the biggest impact? And, one of them said, I was able to create 200 scripts. I run it every night at like 4 in the morning, or every morning at 4 in the morning. And when I come into work in the morning, I have a report that shows, here's, the flakiness of my system. Okay, normally that test would have taken one person 5 to 8 hours. Never mind doing it 200 times, over the course of a day. So that was a huge ROI to that, that group, because they were able to set it up, put it on a scheduler, have it run every morning, and come in and know the results of that. Other people said, okay, I need strictly API testing. That's all we did. Every developer uses it. Every QA person uses it. So it wasn't just a testing usage of the tool. All their developers wrote their unit test in automation tools to be able to just further enhance the efficiency of what they were doing. And they're strictly API tests. So, they're calling the SOAP WSDLs, they're calling REST URLs, and it knocked it down by 5 hours a person to be able to do this in an automation tool. So there's a lot of different ways that each person and each group, each project, each, module that they're using can boost the performance of their teams.
This is excellent to see. Do you want me to move to the next one?
Yeah, yes, please. I wasn't sure if there was a question.
Oh, sorry. No.
Okay, so the real world benefits for some of our test scripts are obviously having large testing teams that can use a tool, execute smoke tests, do upgrade tests to be able to make sure that when they come in, this new upgrade hasn't taken down their entire environment. What does that look like in the future after using automation? a button gets clicked or a scheduler kicks off, and all of a sudden you come in the morning and it's done. You get a report, you're able to dive in to each test that's failed, what step is failed, and then you can go into the application and see exactly what failed. You can get that more in-depth error log and debugging log to say, okay, this script failed because, somebody changed their password and I didn't go update their password. So the ability to not just figure that out manually, once you've automated it, it gives you so much more visibility into the little in-depth pieces of your testing structure and how to make it better. One of the gaps, I think, is how people transition from manual testing into automation testing if they're not familiar with it. How to get a team to adapt to, I'm that veteran. I'm used to writing all my test scripts and executing them myself. And now I'm just going to hand that over to somebody else who's going to automate it. Well, now what do I do? It's that knowledge, or whether it's, even if it's AI, it's what do I do now? Well, now you take on a different role or better role, because now you still have to build that strategy. You still have to figure out all the pieces and the components that have to get tested. But now, instead of you spending tens of, hours on it, now you can hand that off to someone else once you've built your structure and say, this is what we need. This is what we're expecting. This is where we're thinking it may go wrong. Hand it off to an automation expert, and then they can create that whole structure for you. Now you can go take on the next project. You don't have to spend all that time. So I think just the shift in thinking as well can benefit people to learn from, how do I go from being manual to automation? Or it's they want to pick up the skills. Somebody that's, friendly with writing code, reading code, understanding it. They want to take on, I want to go learn how to do automation. There's more classes on writing the scripts and everything else. So, and if they have that developer, like I call it developer brain, where they can write the code and really execute it, then they can become an automation expert as well. Because now you have the testing part of the logic that you need and the understanding of an application and what's really expected. Now you can take that and translate that into code to be able to create your automation scripts.
That is fantastic, and I'll add to that. We have been developing a narrative around that, and one of the things that I like to tell our customers is that you're not leaving manual testing behind. Like, to your point, you're still strategizing. You need to know what to test, and so the seeing from the action from manual to automation is more of the integration of automation with manual testing, and how those two are going to make testers even much better. To your point, now you just don't have to waste time doing repetitive tasks over and over, but now you can use your time in a much valuable way to strategize and identify anything that has to be tested. That is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that insight.
Yeah, I mean, manual testing is always going to be needed because it's always the starting point of testing in an organization. And it's to be able to do 100% automation is always a lofty goal. We always try, but like you said in the beginning, a lot of organizations are only automating 10% because I'd rather put 10% on the shelf that can be reused every day, every hour, every upgrade, versus put 70% on the shelf and I never use it. I've seen so many projects come out to where, oh yeah, we automated this, this whole section. Okay, great. Now who's going to update it when it needs updating? Oh, well, we didn't think about that. Or, how often are we going to run it? Well, it only ran until we went live. The minute we went live, it stopped working. Now you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on automating scripts, on the software, on the tools, and then it sits on, it's literally sitting on the shelf, not being used, because that thought hasn't been put into it on how can we keep it going? How do we, expand upon it and keep it running after a go live?
Right. Womar, anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I will say that's performance testing. It's more like we have a third step after first manual testing that is adopted in the company. Then automated testing, and then people are telling themselves, okay, maybe we need to do performance testing after that. So there's no like manual testing for performance testing. That will be very difficult. But usually we need to convince people that just monitoring production and checking the performances in production is not enough. And they need to test before that to make sure that the application will work and will not come down after some time. So that's more of the challenge we face in performance testing.
Very excellent. Thank you. As we do a quick check on time, I know we're over the hour, but this is fantastic. All the insights that Daniel is sharing. Daniel, I see that we have our slides for Catalan and Octoperf. Anything else that you would like to add before we move on onto the Q&A section?
Just another thank you, and for those out there that are working through automation and trying to either select tools, or you're already using one of the Catalan and Octoperf. There's so much more that both of these tools are doing and coming in the AI and the large language model type assistance to testing. It really is helpful across all the different tech stacks and everything else that all of our industries are throwing at us, to be able to find a tool that's kind of growing with you and you can grow with, so that way you're not stuck at having to go pick another tool because the tool's not changing. Whereas some in the industry are not. They've got their tool, they're happy with it, and they don't want to expand.
Right.
Both of you are expanding to be able to help us grow with our applications and our projects. So,
let me put you on the spot. Which products of Catalan are you using?
We have TestOps, we have Catalan, we have the runtime engine. We're using Visual Test. We're not using the new AI functions yet. But...
Got it. Okay. All right. So you're in the studio, TestOps. You have the full house. That's pretty cool to hear. Thank you for sharing that. So for those of you, if you're new to Catalan, this is a quick intro of Catalan. We are a test automation tool. The one thing that you may know us for, especially, is Catalan Studio, where you can go ahead and test mobile, web, desktop, web, and API applications. You can do full code, no code. We also have AI-supported test creation. You can execute tests in the same place. So pretty much anything that you need to do in terms of your testing pipeline can be done in Catalan. If you want to find out more about us, you can go to catalan.com. And I am going to switch to the next slide, where Omar is going to also tell us a little bit about Octoperf.
So you will see that we have a lot of common things with Catalan. So basically, we offer a platform for load testing. The main key benefits of our platform is that you can do everything that is needed to be done with load testing on a single platform using your browser, which is efficient, and you only have one place where you need to work. We also, the goal is that everyone can do load testing, because it's a very technical field. So if you have just let's in the field and you have to learn for yourself, it's very difficult. So the UI is really streamlined. We have automatic detection of performance issues, automatic creation of reports. That way you can immediately see what is going on during the load test, where are the problems, and fix them. In terms of cost, we are on the lower end of the market. So that's important if you want to start doing load testing in a company that maybe is not really familiar with those kind of fields. And so the how, so as I said, you can basically do the whole campaign on Octoperf. You can create your scripts. You can scale the load test, which means that, for instance, if you are using the SaaS platform, you don't have to worry about the number of load generators. So you will just configure, let's say, 1 million concurrent users, and we will start the machines to do that. And you will not pay for the machines. You will only pay for the number of users. And as I said, you can analyze the performances using the browser, create your own customized report. And also, as I said before during the presentation, you can integrate Octoperf inside your company with your on-premise platform, which is the exact same tool as in the SaaS platform. And we integrate with the main CI/CD softwares on the market, and of course with Catalon, where you can execute load tests from Catalon directly.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing those insights. And I believe we addressed all the questions that we had in the Q&A, as well as the ones that arrived in the chat. So with that, I want to thank you all for participating today in this webinar. Danielle, the presentation was amazing. Thank you so much for all the insights. And Womar, also, thank you so much for being here with us. We truly appreciate your company. So to the rest of our audience, again, this is going to be available on demand at catalon.com/webinars and all of our channels. And if you want to hear more about upcoming webinars that we have, please keep an eye on your email, in your inbox, and also go ahead and check out our website. We're going to keep promoting the next episodes for this series. We have a lot of stuff coming down the road, especially a special episode where we're going to talk about the findings of the State of Software Quality Report 2025. Thank you again, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.